Hello, hello. My name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and welcome to Week 8 of AKA Sports. And with me, as always, Fletch. How you doing this week?
Great, man. Great. I cannot complain. How are you?
I am doing better, a little bit under the weather, but I will power through just for the shoots and ladders of things. We have ourselves a very big show upcoming. We'll be talking about some news and notes. We've got some big fights coming up. We'll be talking about some college football, NFL, MLB playoff races. But before we get to that, remember, simply go to anchor.fm/. AKA Sports to listen to any one of our podcast spots, or if you want to watch us like you are on YouTube, simply go to youtube.com and search for AKA Sports. But really, for Fletch, again, we've got a lot to talk about, but there is one subject that I saw on ESPN. There was an article that came out that the Knight Commission is a separate group away from the NCAA, did basically an audit almost, you could say, on the NCAA, and they found out, not really digging too deep because we've known all this for years, that they felt like the NCAA coaches and the athletics facilities was making too much money and they should reallocate those funds over about $3 billion worth of money back into the academic side of the institutions. And I want to make sure I get this right because it's a very long winded title that they did this report. It is titled Connecting Athletics Revenues with the Educational Model of College Sports, or CARE. And we've talked a little bit off the air how terrible that name is, simply because the M is completely removed. I'm not sure why that's the case, but they made some very interesting points that basically half the revenue should go back into the educational system. And then one more important thing that I mentioned as well off the air, that back in December they thought or recommended that the NCAA no longer take care of the football side of things. I mean, is that something that kind of sounds about right?
To a degree, I would agree with the fact that the revenue split is a little iffy. I feel like a lot of that probably should be put back in schools, and then like this long-winded title of a commission is mentioning, you know, as far as the college football or football in college, we should say now, be separated from the NCAA. I mean, I think it should be separated, man. Because if you just really look at the whole scheme of things, they bring in the most money, and a lot of that money's kept there anyways. Yeah, there probably should be some type of percentage that goes back to the schools. They got to figure that out. That may be amongst maybe the universities or whatever new commission that would oversee just college football outside of the NCAA. That's a lot. The fact that there's a commission is interesting in itself. So you could see some things shift. I mean, we're already seeing conference realignment and NIL stuff going on. It's a matter of time before the whole landscape of college sports changes. And this Night Commission, I don't even know what you call them outside that name and acronym. It's not it, Clark. But um, outside of that, I mean, the idea of it is actually pretty good. The name sucks though, but the idea is pretty good. I'm kind of on board. I just have to. I think I gotta wait for more.
Yeah, and there's definitely going to be some more information coming out about it. I've been saying it for quite a while now, and I think I've mentioned it to everyone
Yeah.
here on the podcast as well, that college football is an ever evolving door at this point, is continuing to shift and change, not just with conferences, but the landscape itself. Again, I knew the NCAA eventually was going to break apart from football, or football from the NCAA, to be a little bit more exact here. But it makes all the sense in the world that this isn't a mandate by the Knight Commission. This is just simply their 2 cents on the subject. Not that the
Right.
NCAA actually has to do anything about it, but it is a recommendation from an outside source, a reputable source at that. So we'll see exactly what happens. And again, it's still evolving, still ever changing. We'll see what kind of information comes out and if they do follow any of these mandates moving forward. But let's go ahead and jump into some news and notes this week. Let's go ahead and start off with some of the bigger news that I saw, at least on ESPN. A new MMA league in 2023 is potentially being formed by a couple different groups. They want to formulate it to be more like NFL or MLB or NBA, more like NBA type structure where there's a 50-50 revenue split, there's unionizing, there's the whole gamut of things. Fletch, you're a little bit more in depth with the UFC. You like that fighting scene a little bit more. Do you believe that this will push away from the UFC? Will this be a strict competitor to them, or will it completely just fold and the UFC will find a way to just stay on top the way they are?
I mean, for every action, there's a reaction. I'm gonna lead by saying that because I think UFC being the big dog on the MMA platform as they are with the ESPN deal, I think that has a lot of weight as far as the power that they have. I don't think they'll be able to stop this from happening, but I think they'll have something to do with it moving forward, whether that be them getting involved in it themselves, them taking the idea of this. But I do think that the leverage that UFC has over Bellator, over any of these other MMA entities, if you will, I think we're going to have to see a few dominoes fall for them to restructure a few things. The biggest thing that's interesting with this, though, is the timing. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and the timing of this is very interesting because this new MMA league is set to launch in 2023. Um, Also, to mention, um, what is our guy's name? Ariel Helwani used to be with, or Helwani. Correct. I don't know if I'm saying that correct or not, but we know who he is. The guy with ESPN that used to do MMA. He left ESPN to do his own thing. Then he spills this tea. So it almost leads you to believe he may even have not so much something to do with the whole structure of it, but he could also be involved in this as well as being just a partner, journalist, because now he's on his own. He doesn't have ESPN to answer to any longer. Also, ESPN's UFC deal was signed in 2019, which was at that point a 5-year deal. That deal is set to end in 2024, just a year after this league is supposed to launch. With that being said, yeah, there could be 1 year where this league may be on its own, but this also again could open up the door for the UFC to be involved in this, or UFC fighters leaving to join this new MMA league and then being involved in it that way, and still being on ESPN if this new league draws enough interest to allow ESPN to have that to strike a deal with them. So this is a something right now that seems small or not as big on the whole landscape of things, especially with upcoming fights that we do have. But in the long run, this could change the game for mixed martial arts as we know it.
Agreed. And I think the two interesting points that came out of that article was the 50-50 revenue split that we also see in the NBA. Obviously, if you can get the
Mm-hmm.
fighters to come in, they're going to come for a 50-50 split. That's absolutely no problem there. And then just
Definitely.
getting the right players to come in. That's really going to be the key because if they can get those television deals, especially like you mentioned, the one ending in 2024, if they can get a
Mm-hmm.
1 year underneath their belt and get a lot of interest, yeah, I could easily see this being a more of a competitive. But as we saw with the NFL, the XFL kind of struggled. The AAF or didn't really work out either. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can get enough of a foundation built to actually create a league and compete with the UFC, or if the UFC is just going to continue to uh, bully their way through and do things what they have done for years. But as you mentioned, we have some very big upcoming fights. Tell us about said fights.
Yes, sir. So we're gonna switch it over. Last, really, actually, really quick, last point about MMA as well is that the one thing to be on the lookout for with this possible change is also what happens to Bellator, and also any mergers that could happen. I did want to mention that too. But like you mentioned, man, we got some big fights coming up. It was set up to be a really big summer. I don't even remember we had the Errol Spence versus Pacquiao, and that was supposed to be the big heavyweight fight, or excuse me, welterweight fight. But the big fight of the summer, those are two of the best boxers on the planet. One being a legend, one legend in the making. And we didn't get that due to Spence's injury that he suffered in sparring. It was replaced by Ugas. who actually beat Pacquiao pretty soundly. And then now we're moving into the rest of the fight season, and a lot of fights are starting to come up. So we're gonna go in chronological order here. Keep it simple for the folks at home, man. Less than 30 days from now, October 9th, that weekend, we have Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, number 3. I'm excited about this one. Deontay Wilder has a lot to prove after being knocked on his ass last time, and the first fight being a draw. Um, Fury still undefeated. Wilder's only loss is to Fury, so this one has fireworks. This one has fireworks. There's a lot of animosity, but I think there's a genuine respect between these two, and these are probably the two most popular heavyweights. I'm sorry, that we've seen in a long time. So I'm really excited about this one. Um, as far as the next upcoming fight that we have, November 6th, we got Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, as people know, honestly, to me, number one pound for pound fighter in the world. Um, Moved up from being in a welterweight division up to, I believe, light middleweight or something around that ballpark. So many different what do you call these classes that it's kind of hard to keep up, especially with Alvarez moving up quite a bit. But this fight against Caleb Plant is set to be a big one. Caleb Plant is not known by most, but respected by many in the boxing world, and he's a damn good boxer himself. And I'm looking forward to a good fight there. And then lastly, the most recently announced fight in the biggest division in boxing right now, the welterweight division that had, as we mentioned earlier, Spence, Pacquiao, Ugas, who is probably 3 out of the top 5 fighters in this division. The other two are going to be facing off November 20th. That's Terrence Crawford and Sean Porter. Clark, really, really quick, what I want to do this for Sean Porter, man. This is not because Sean Porter's from Ohio. This is simply because Sean Porter seems to be the forgotten man in boxing. Reason why I say that is because Sean Porter has fought, I believe, every notable welterweight outside of Terrence Crawford, and on November 20th, that will change. That there has been in like the last 5 to 8 years or so. There's a list. Excuse me, outside of Floyd as well. I mean, granted, Floyd was a little older when Porter showed up, but there's not really been many welterweights that Porter has not fought. In this division, we've named 5 of them already, and we haven't even mentioned Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia yet. He's faced all of them, beat many of them, and now here we are, and he's getting a chance at Terrence Crawford. And they figured out the whole top rank, PBC whole thing as well, and that's really nice to see that we finally get that. I think this is shaping up to kind of unify the belts, and I think we're going to see. I think the welterweight division will be unified. If I had to guess, sometime late 2022, early 2023. So these fights have a lot of weight, especially that last one.
Yeah, and there's definitely some big fights coming up, and I can definitely recommend the Fury Wilder 3. The first two are
Oh yeah,
absolutely great. We'll see exactly what happens there, and we'll keep an eye on them, and we'll definitely be talking about them when these fights actually do happen. Um, as for now, let's go ahead and move over to the MLB playoff races. At this very moment in time, as of this podcast, there is a three-way tie for the two wild card spots in the AL between the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and the Red Sox. The Athletics and the Mariners are both 3 and 4 games out, respectively. It's really a 5 team race for those two spots. In the NL, one of them is already locked up unless we see one of the most historic drops of all time, and the Dodgers, who have a 17-game lead over the now Cardinals in the second spot. But the Cardinals are fighting with the Padres and Reds, who are both 1 game out, and then the Phillies that are 3 games out, and the Mets that are 5 games out. And really, division-wise, the NL West is a fight between the Dodgers and the Giants. Currently, the Giants have a slim lead in that division. We'll see exactly who wins that division and who is the first wild card victory there. The Brewers pretty much have the Central locked up, and then the NL East is really close. We still have the Braves, the Phillies, and the Mets, but the Braves just need to continue to winning, and they will lock themselves into the playoffs. As for the AL, again, up top, the Rays should easily handle the AL East. I think they have an 8 game lead at this point, maybe even a 9 at this very moment. The White Sox have had wrapped up the Central for quite some time, and then the Astros have extended their lead yet again. I don't believe either the Athletics or the Mariners will be able to catch them. So at this point, we're just waiting for the wild cards to be figured out. We are actually 3 weeks away from playoff baseball. Fletch,
Yeah.
I know we have dealt with it a little bit off air. Um, as of this very moment, knowing the rankings or knowing the standings for the wild card, who are the two teams coming out of the AL and who are the two teams coming out of the NL?
Um. let's go ahead and start with the AL. I think the AL you kind of alluded to it a little bit. It's technically a 5 team race, but I do believe the rest of the contenders in the AL East will separate themselves even further. I'll be honest, man. Just being kind of a traditionalist here, if you will, I'm really just hoping Yankees Red Sox for the playing game. I would love to see it. That would be my choice for the AL as far as the wild card teams coming out of there. The NL, I mean, the Dodgers are a lock. We're sticking with the Dodgers here on that side, but on the for the last wild card spot, that fifth spot, I think it's really hard to say, but I'm gonna go with the Cards. They just seem a little bit more hot right now. I know them and the Reds have been battling a little bit, but one key thing that stood out to me when I was checking out the standings is that the Cards are 7-3 in their last 10 games and on a 5 game winning streak, whereas the Reds are 3-7 in their last 10 games, literally going the opposite direction. That tells me 10 games ago that would mean the Reds would have had at least a 3 game lead on the Cards, and that has changed. I get momentum can swing. I get the Phillies and the Mets have a shot. The Padres are right there as well. They're 4-6 in their last 10. But I'm gonna go with the Cards to face the Dodgers in the playing game. I think the Dodgers are going to end up being that wild card team, losing out to the West behind San Fran. So that's what I would choose. What are you seeing out there, man?
Yeah, I'm seeing at this point, definitely, obviously, the Dodgers still have it locked in there. I really like the Cardinals pick. I honestly think that maybe, just maybe, the Padres will sneak their way in and have to battle the Dodgers in that first wild card game. But kind of what you've alluded to, why it took you a little bit to make that pick is just because everyone's so close at this point, with only
Yeah.
3 weeks away. It's very very difficult to pick. In the AL, it's even worse because you have the very young, talented Blue Jays, the Yankees, who are finally winning 3 straight games, but are kind of up and down. They were at one point winning 13 straight, then lost 7 straight right afterwards. Um, and then you have the Red Sox that just can't seem to stay healthy at the right time. As for those two, it's tough because me being a Homer Yankee fan, I would love to see the Yankees in the playoffs, but I don't know which Yankees I'm going to see when I get to the playoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick the Blue Jays, and then I'm going to pick, sadly enough, I'm going to have to pick the Red Sox to be that
Oh
second wild
wow.
card spot. Simply because the Yankees are just too up and down. I would love to see differently. Maybe that's why I'm not picking them. I would like to see myself wrong. But I think I got the Blue Jays and the Red Sox being those wild card teams. We mentioned a little bit off air about some of our MVP candidates in the AL. It's really come down to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. versus Shohei Ohtani. Just saw
Yep.
news earlier today that Shohei Ohtani may not pitch the rest of the season, maybe shut down by the organization. Does that sway your vote at all, maybe towards Vlad of getting the MVP?
No, if I mean I've mentioned it. I think maybe just a couple times on air. I know I've mentioned to you off air quite a few times. I love Otani. Like the biggest thing that draws me in is because he's it's not just a one positional player. He's 9-2 as a starting pitcher, and he's second in homers. That we haven't seen that. I don't think in I don't know how long. Definitely not, probably not my lifetime, my parents' lifetime. We That's not something you don't see. These a When we say once in generational talent, this is what we're talking about. With this guy, it may be like once in a century type talent. So I'm here for it. I'll be honest with you. I don't. I'm not a fan of giving MVPs to players on teams that don't make the playoffs. Um, People that know me know this after my beef about Steph Curry this year, but it's a different ball game. I think outside of like football or basketball, where a quarterback in football can dictate a sport, dictate the game. One player in basketball, like Steph Curry or LeBron James or whatever one of those great players, can dictate an entire game. A pitcher in baseball, excuse me, in this case, a pitcher slash hitter in baseball. Unfortunately, there's just no way in baseball to dictate an entire game. You can't control when the next guy in the batting order comes up to bat against a Cy Young finalist level player. It's just that's just there's no control over that. Whereas other sports there is. So that's why I'm rolling with Otani. He can't control the fortune of his team in this sport like other players can in other sports. Baseball is just not made that way. So I'm rolling with Otani at the AL.
I agree. Unless Vlad goes off and just somehow gets to 60 home runs, and even then it
Yeah.
may not be enough just because, like you mentioned, when's the last time we've seen a pitcher and a hitter, the same person do exactly both? Well, the answer would be George Herman Ruth would be your answer
I
to
was
that.
thinking that.
Uh, yeah, that's how long ago it's been since we've seen a pitcher and a hitter all be in the same person. So,
Hmm.
congratulations on a phenomenal season for really every single one of them that are in the MVP race. I know in the NL they're typically looking at Fernando Tatis Jr. as well as a Max Muncy from the Dodgers. And there's a couple other candidates there. It's much, much closer on that side. In the AL, it's really down to those two. So it'll be very interesting to see in these last 3 weeks of baseball, see exactly who comes out on top. I think the Cy Young Award for both leagues are very, very tight as well. So we'll keep a touch. We'll keep looking at both of those and see exactly who we think just might win it all, but give us a little bit more information in the meantime. Last but not least, for the news and notes, let's talk about college football. We just got done with a very interesting week. The top 25 is out, and we took a look at it, and we have some differing opinions about the top 25. Now, obviously, anybody who knows me, and if I haven't mentioned it before, for me, the AP and the coaches pool is maybe not the best metrics to look at for top 25, but that's what we have for right now. Obviously, we'll be taking a much closer look once we get to playoff time, about week 9, I believe, for the College Football Playoff Committee. We'll be talking much more in depth on those. For this 25, obviously, the top four: Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Oregon after their nice win in Columbus this past weekend. Obviously, Alabama is the cream of the crop. There's really no one else in their league at this very moment, at least in my opinion. I think Fletch might feel the same as well. Um,
Yeah.
Georgia, hey, nothing wrong with a very short answer. I'm fine with that. Georgia, super great defense. They look great against Clemson, uh, but their offense is still kind of a little bit of a guessing game at this point. We'll see exactly if they can put up a much better number against a. Clemson was a good defense in and of itself, but we'll see if they can continue to improve and maybe get closer to challenging Alabama maybe towards the end of the season. Oklahoma looked good, but then they almost lost. And I think offensively, I think Oklahoma's very, like a better version of Ohio State at this point. Offensively, they're very, very good, very talented. They can score a lot. Defensively, they're about where Ohio State is, where you kind of have a lot of question marks still. But their offense is just enough better because they can score when they really need to. We haven't quite seen that in the two small game sample that we've seen so far from Ohio State. But speaking of Oregon, they looked really, really good um, on Saturday as well. They'll have. I don't think they have too many big games coming up. We took a look at the schedule. Fletch, what were some games coming up this week that you have your eye on?
Yeah, man, for sure. So, just a few to mention here. We'll kind of start with the top. I mean, that's Alabama, Florida. I mean, that's going to be the game that I think everybody's really looking for. That's 3:30 Saturday afternoon. So perfect timing. I know they like to play these games midday for the most part. The other games that draw interest to me would be Cincinnati, Indiana, Penn State, Auburn. No, I'm gonna throw a sleeper out here. I think Notre Dame Purdue intrigues me, and the reason being Notre Dame just hasn't really looked as good as their ranking says they are. They struggled with Florida State, who just lost to Jacksonville State. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
So I don't know how we take that. It's week two, and then you turn around and you struggle last week against gosh, what Mac is it? A Mac school they played? Um,
Who was
oh
that?
man, Notre Dame last week. Last
It
week,
was Toledo, I believe.
Toledo. Yes, Mac school. I had a feeling it was a Mac conference school. So yeah, I mean, you struggle with Toledo. You only win by three and kind of go back and forth with them all game. Yeah, here we go. It was 39 to 20, 30, 32 to 29. I'm sorry. I'm not sold. And Purdue being, I'm not saying they're great, but they've normally been respected in college football, especially in the Big Ten. At least somebody you can't just walk over. Also, too, somewhat of a rivalry game, if you will. I mean, so you have some things going on here that are very interesting. So that's something to keep in mind. Those are the ones I'm really looking out for. Um, there's a few others, but those are probably the main ones that I'll be paying attention to.
Yeah, there's
What
not.
about you?
Yeah, there's not really a ton on that schedule. I think one of the a few games that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I think the Michigan State Miami game is going to be very interesting, simply
Mm,
because we've seen how bad really Miami is. I don't know if they should be ranked within the top 25. Michigan State's looked very good so far this season. We'll see exactly how good when they travel down to Hard Rock Stadium on Saturday. And really, the only other game that I could see of interest, keeping an eye on, maybe. Uh, let's keep an eye on that Virginia North Carolina game over in
mm.
the ACC. It's in North Carolina. North Carolina has kind of lost against Virginia Tech, so they should be able to handle business there at home. But which North Carolina are we going to see? The team that was suspected to be one of the top teams in the nation, or a team that's going to be quickly falling out of it?
Right.
But hats off to Iowa getting a huge win last week, playing Iowa State. Such a great rivalry game very early on. They always play that one very early on in the season. They got a great win there. They're currently ranked number 5. And then really hats off to Luke Fickell in Cincinnati. They just continue to climb up the board. I know in the AP poll they fell a spot, but again, that's why we don't really put a whole lot of favor in the AP poll. It's a popularity contest. Let's move on before we really get into a rant because we could be here all day about that.
Yeah,
Um,
we could.
as for college football, one last thing, there is a little bit of a shift in 2023. We're looking at Cincinnati, Houston, UCF, and BYU joining the Big 12. They have
Oh
all
yeah.
sent in their invitations. They were all accepted unanimously by the Big 12. This was a huge step for the Big 12 to stay relevant, to keep a conference all intact. We'll see exactly what happens with the SEC and the Big 10 and that alliance, with the Big 10, the ACC, and the Pac 12 moving forward. But as for this very moment, at least by 2023, the Big 12 will still hold a conference, still have some very, very viable teams, and we'll see exactly how that affects not only football, but all the other sports in there as well. Any other news and notes you got for us, Fletch?
Not necessarily, man. Just to mention the Big 12, I'll be honest. I got to eat my words. I mentioned the Big 12 was dead weeks ago, and I don't know if they're dead. At this point, this was a great move by them. I said it earlier in the show. Speaking of MMA, every action has a reaction, and we've talked about this on air. How everyone's reacting to what's happening with the college football landscape, what the SEC is doing. I think the Big 12 did a awesome job of rebounding. I mean, you just got four very quality football schools. Basketball wise, these teams are also very notable. I believe Houston was in the Elite Eight last year. Cincinnati's always had a good basketball program, if anyone follows that. And BYU has had some notable college stars over the last 20 years or so. And then UCF just notably had Taco Fall come through there. So, I mean, they were tournament team that year as well. So, I mean, you have some very good teams on the basketball and football side of things. And also, if the shift doesn't happen very quickly, you could see a couple years in the Big 12 where, while Texas and Oklahoma is still there, if that happens. Things could be very interesting those couple seasons as well. Looks like maybe 2 seasons max. We may or may not see that unless Texas and Oklahoma get out of there sooner than later. But yeah, man, I just want to throw that in there. Outside of that, I really don't. There was really no more major news, as we mentioned earlier in the show. Just be on the lookout for the big boxing matches coming up, MLB kind of coming up to a close, and that's pretty much all we have right now.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and before we move on to our recap of week one of the NFL and heading into week two, let's talk about our sponsor, Legit Framing. Yes, once again, you've heard me talk about it every single show so far just because of how good they are. You've got sports memorabilia. I've got one right beside me. It's a signed Eddie George jersey. Yes, Ohio State signed Eddie George jersey. I'm going to have it framed. It's going to look great on my wall for my man cave. And if you want one for your man and or woman cave, simply go to facebook.com/legitframing or go to legitframing@hotmail.com and send us an email. Get yourself a free quote to figure out exactly how you want it framed. Do you want it in a 24 by 36 inch frame or a 30 by 33 or 30 by 36-inch frame? Nice wood frames, styrene fronts, player photos, team logos. We can even put cards in there, plaques in there. Again, get your free quote today by going to facebook.com/legitframing or send us an email at legitframing@hotmail.com. Fletch, it is week two of the NFL. Week one has concluded. We saw
Yes, sir.
a lot of good games. If you're playing in fantasy football, maybe you're happy, maybe you're sad, but with 16 more, a full season yet to go for fantasy games, you still have a chance, Fletch, to make the playoffs. So that is always good news for you. Um, that being said, we have a season week two opening game tonight. We have the Giants versus the Washington football team. Very low over under. Not expecting a whole lot of scoring in that one. And we're still waiting on Saquon Barkley to get fully healthy. But if we move on throughout the rest of the schedule, we have the Patriots at the Jets, we have the Broncos at the Jaguars, we have the Bills at the Dolphins, we have the Niners at the Eagles, the Rams at the Colts. Moving forward through the rest of the 1 o'clock games, you have the Raiders at the Steelers. You have the Bengals at the Bears, the Texans at the Browns, the Saints at the Panthers. Then you move on to the Vikings, Cardinals, Falcons, Buccaneers, Titans, Seahawks, Cowboys, Chargers, Chiefs, Ravens, which would be a good Sunday night football game. And then Aaron Rodgers and company in Green Bay host the also winless Lions to try and get back on schedule. Fletch, like we mentioned, we're both in a fantasy football league for sleeper. Uh, I've started out 1-0. You're 0-1 to start, which isn't terrible. You only lost that game. I think it was less than a point is when you lost
Yeah,
that game. Very, very close on Monday night. Uh,
yes, Monday night killed me.
Hey, it was such a great game. It was such a good opening Thursday night game in week one. Got Cowboys Buccaneers. It was an absolutely great game to watch. And then you finished it off with an overtime game with the Raiders eking out over the Ravens, technically twice in that game if you were paying attention.
Yep.
Uh, it was absolutely a great first week of football. We've got our pick six coming up, so we'll be talking about those games. But beyond those six games, on that schedule, which games are you keeping an eye on for your fantasy teams?
Yeah, for sure. I'll be honest, and this podcast will air Friday morning, but one game that I am looking out for is going to be the Thursday night game between the Giants and the Washington football team. There are a lot of good fantasy players in this game, so I'm going to mention a few things here. So number one, Saquon Barkley is set to play tonight, which is a little surprising, seeing that he will be playing 2 games in essentially 4 and 5 days, coming off an ACL injury. So, even if he doesn't perform fantasy wise, I do hope that he doesn't get hurt. Hope he stays healthy. I don't have it on any teams, but you never wish an injury on anybody, and I just hope we may see a little more Devontae Booker tonight than we may see the rest of the season. So, as a fantasy football player, I'm in 4 leagues this year. Devontae Booker is only uh, rostered on one of these 4 leagues, and I think that's about right. The that's a sleeper. If you're in a 14 team league, or if you're in a super flex league and you're really looking for another sleeper, that might be somebody you at least look at because tonight I think he'll get more snaps than he normally would get due to the fact that these games are so close together for somebody like Saquon Barkley. So on the Giants side of things, that's the one thing I would look for. The other thing would just be what receiver is going to emerge. Is it going to be Sterling Shepard? Um, um, is Daniel Jones also going to have a good game? Those are the things you want to look out for. And then on the flip side, there is a matchup on for Washington that you really want to pay attention is Terry McLaurin versus Bradbury here in the secondary. I think that's a really good matchup. It kind of I have McLaurin in one of my leagues, Clark, and I'm not sure if I'm playing him tonight. I will make my decision in probably the next. It's 7:30 right now, folks. The game starts at 8:20. I'll be making my decision probably the next 45 minutes. So we got to figure that out. You got to also think Antonio Gibson. He's going to do his thing tonight. I think you'll see a much better game than what you saw last week for him. Not, I don't think anything crazy, but I do think he has a better game. And then outside of that, I really wouldn't put too much stock in Washington's quarterback. Heineke, was it Taylor Heineke?
Hmm.
I like him. He's a gamer, man. I feel about guys that I think are gamers. I really like them, and they bring a lot to the table, a lot of competitiveness. But don't I wouldn't put much stock into him on your fantasy team. But just know he's still going to be able to get your receivers and tight ends the ball. Is one thing I can say about him. Not maybe as the high value as Fitzpatrick, but I do think he'll be throwing the ball enough to give McLaurin a chance to make some noise this year, or this game. So that's kind of my game that I'm looking out for right now. It's actually this Thursday night game. What about you, man?
Yeah, not a problem. So the games that I'm going to be taking a look at, especially for fantasy purposes, if you have any Denver Bronco, play them. They're going
Mm,
against Jacksonville this week, so definitely get them on your rosters, except for obviously Jerry Judy, who's still out 4 to 6 weeks at this point. But moving on, another interesting games that we'll be watching this weekend. Will the Titans rebound this weekend? We'll see about that one. I think it might be one of our pick sixes this week. Another interesting game that I thought of. Uh, we'll see the Bengals and the Bears. We'll see exactly how good the Bears defense is. The Bengals offense looked pretty good. We thought Minnesota's defense was actually going to be good in Week One. Well, we they were as good as they were last year, which is not good at all. Uh, Burrow looked good. Jamar Chase looked great. He had the drop season the preseason, but he looked really, really good. He had a 50-yard touchdown catch in that game. So definitely keep an eye on that, especially for fantasy wise. I would be starting Chase and Higgins. Depending on what your quarterback situation is like, maybe you play Burrow in this one. As for the Bears, it's simple. It's David Montgomery. It's Allen Robinson. You play your notables. Pretty easy there. We'll see exactly how long this revenge game will happen with Andy Dalton moving forward. Uh, but yeah, there's going to definitely some interesting games on the uh, locket this week. But let's go ahead and get to our pick six challenge. Uh, Before we get into this week's games, Fletch, we gotta talk about the records. It's a
Really,
thing we do.
really.
We have to.
Okay,
We
fair
every
enough.
single week. I've got a running tally that if you're on YouTube.com, you will see a running tally every single week. As you can see on my side, I am 5-1 after last week, only missing the Buffalo game, and Fletch is currently 3-3. So couple picks back, nothing terrible. You still have time to make it up. This week is a
Early.
great time to do it. And again, if you want to join in on the fun every single week, we'll be posting these Pick Six games on YouTube, on our Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram. We're posting it everywhere. If you want to join, just simply put in the comments, hey, this is who my picks are. We'll add you to the list, and we will keep everybody up to date. Probably do a full rankings reveal of how everyone's doing. Maybe in a couple weeks or so, we'll see how it plays out. But for right now, again, Fletch has got some work to do. So Fletch, first game on the docket: Vikings, Cardinals. Cardinals looked absolutely amazing in Week One against Tennessee, an absolute trouncing. Vikings lost in overtime to the Bengals, but their offense still looked really, really good as of last year. For Week Two, who do you got?
Yes, sir. I'm rolling with the Arizona Cardinals. I'm really liking them this year. I think they showed a lot week one. I think Kyler Murray is poised to take another step. And hopefully, the defense can do what they did last week and really harass the quarterback. I'm going with the Arizona Cardinals.
I like it so much, I'm going to pick them as well. Again, Kyler Murray looked absolutely phenomenal. 5 total touchdowns in this one. And, oh, it's the Vikings defense. Please and thank you more of Kyler Murray all the
Agreed.
same. In the next matchup, we have Saints Panthers. Saints trouncing the Green Bay Packers in a game over in Jacksonville due to Hurricane Ida. Jameis Winston, if I can think of his name, actually played very, very well. Didn't throw the ball that much, only 18 pass attempts in that game, but they were very, very efficient and scored 38 points, I believe, in that game against the Packers. As for the Panthers, they looked decent against the Jets. It was a game that probably should have been a little bit higher scoring, but it really wasn't. But in this game, it's interesting because I'm not 100% sure who to go with here, but I think I'm going to go with the Saints on this one. Fletch, are you also feeling the Saints?
Not as much. I'll be honest. I think we saw a Packers team that wasn't ready for Week One, and I think the Saints took full advantage. I don't think that was a um, something notable to carry throughout the season. However, on the flip side, I think what's kind of not mentioned about the Jets is this: their coach, was it
Robert Sala.
Salah? Okay, Robert Salah. He's a very good coach. He's very defensive minded. He was, I believe, the DC in San Francisco, and on those teams that had like Richard Sherman, just most recently, but then back before that, with the team that went to I believe it went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Ravens. I want to say he was a DC on those teams. He brings it some grittiness. I don't care who he has on his team. I think we saw that last week. They were outclassed and still were able to kind of do a little bit. I'm not saying Carolina's a great team, but one thing we can say about Carolina is that offense is actually legit. You got McCaffrey back. You got Robbie Anderson now in the fold, reunited with Sam Darnold. You got DJ Moore. There's nothing really to like, there's a lot going on there with the weapons that he has. And Sam Darnold's really not a bad quarterback, man. I mean, nobody looks good with the Jets. Let's just be real about it. At least the Jets of we don't know what these new Jets are going to look like. So for that reason, I do think the Panthers are a very formidable opponent. I think there will be some type of a hangover from the Saints from last week's win. I need to see Jameis for a full season to trust that he can carry the same level of maturity throughout the season. So, coming high off that win last week, we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go with the upset if we can call it one with Carolina.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be that much of an upset. Both teams are 1-0, but the Saints comparatively looked better in week 1, but that was mainly because of how bad the Packers looked
Right.
in week 1 as well. Moving on to our next game, Bills Dolphins. Dolphins again, very similarly to the Panthers, looked good enough, got the win. Nothing overly great there. The Bills, on the other hand, lost to a close game against the Steelers, who the Steelers scored all 23 points in the second half of that game, including a blocked punt returned for a touchdown. The Bills really need to kind of rebound. This is kind of their week to really get things going. Fletch, who you got winning this game?
I got yeah, you just alluded to it. I got the Bills rebounding and taking this one. Honestly, I think pretty handily. I like Miami, and I really like what they were able to do last week. I think Tua is also another QB poised to take another step. Hopefully, there's no sophomore slump there. But at the same time, I think the Bills have too much, and I think they get their act together. Probably had a solid week of practice. There's no notable injuries really to mention over in Buffalo right now. You got your usual suspects that should do damage, and I think the Bills win big.
I agree. I'm not sure if it's going to be a big win because the Dolphins do play very good defensively, but Josh Allen and company, as long as Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and even Devin Singletary looked somewhat okay in this one with a no Zach Moss, it could potentially look for this offense to really kind of rebound. I like them as well. Moving on to our next game, Seahawks Titans. Again, we mentioned earlier, Titans did not look good at all. That offensive line gave up 5 sacks to good old Chandler Jones, who Vegas now has an over/under of 4 sacks the remainder of the season for him. Should be interesting to see if he can get to 9, maybe even double digits this season, getting halfway there in the first game. But for the Seahawks, they looked really good in week one against the Colts, especially that passing attack, letting Russ cook yet again. Hopefully that continues this week. Uh, for me, it's Seahawks. For you, who do you got?
For me, also Seahawks. I'm not betting against Russell Wilson in this one. Sorry about it, Tennessee. I think they're a very good team, a very good opponent. I hate to see how they lost last week. It just didn't look good. And I mean, to be honest with you, this week I don't really expect for them to win. I'm not exactly sure 100% what's going on there, but I think they figure it out. I think that's a really good team. But as of now, man, after what we saw last week from Russell Wilson and those boys, I think you'll see a lot of that again this week. I don't think they win big, but I think they handle it pretty well. I think they win by 2 scores.
Very nice. I agree with that as well. I think the Titans can't stop the pass.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let Russ cook once again, and especially with Tyler Lockett. My goodness, that moonshot that they had last game. Oh
Beautiful,
my goodness. Oh, thing of
beautiful.
beauty. Absolutely loved
Yeah.
it. Final two picks here. First one, Niners starting off the season with a win that may have should have been bigger in week one. Obviously, they had some key players getting hurt. Jason Verrett goes down with a torn ACL. That basically let the Lions back in the second half of that game. They only won by 8, but they still won 41-33. As for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts looks really good, and just like he did in Alabama, just like he did in Oklahoma, he looks like a true leader when it comes to football. They look good as well. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to win this game. I've got San Francisco winning this game. Do you agree?
I disagree. I have
Oh,
Philly winning this game. I'm on the Jalen Hurts train. I am sold after week one. The question was, is Jalen Hurts going to is he a starting quarterback? He's more than a starting quarterback. I hate the game that the Eagles played with not announcing him as a starter to the last minute, whether that be something where you're just trying to make sure he's still competitive or whatnot. I would a kid like Jalen Hurts, man. I hate to call him a kid. He's a grown man now, but at the same time, we got to stop over the last 3 to 4 years, I've never seen a quarterback get benched so much in my life that shouldn't be. I mean, no offense to Tua, but I mean, you get benched for a freshman and comes in, yeah, they win a natty, and then Tua's now the starter for next season. So Jalen Hurts, well, I got to get to the league, so let me go play. He goes plays in Oklahoma. So you mean to tell me the backup quarterback for Alabama, it was a Heisman finalist the next year in Oklahoma? Okay, the kid still has talent. Then you fast forward to the NFL draft, he gets drafted behind numerous quarterbacks. Okay, then you come out in Philly, Wentz lays an egg all last year. You come in his last, I don't know how many games, I want to say 6 games or so, he was fantasy relevant. This year, I mean, just this one game, and I think coming into this year, he looks poised to really break out, man. And I'll be honest, I'm sorry I passed him up in a lot of leagues this year. I'm not going to worry about it moving forward, but at the same time, I'm on the Jalen Hurts train. I think that's why I have Philly winning. I think because of him, I originally had Washington winning this division. I'm not changing my pick quite yet, but I do think Philly's going to have a lot to say about it.
agreed. They look like they should be on the rebound. I was unsure exactly how long it was going to take for that connection between Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith to kind of really vibe there, but my goodness, they are hitting it off
Away.
right away. So, all good signs pointing towards Philly doing some very good things this season. As for our last pick, it is the Sunday night football game. Might be one of the better games this week. It is the Chiefs versus the Ravens. Fletch, I'll let you go first on this one. Who do you got winning this game?
Appreciate it. We got the Kansas City Chiefs winning this game and going 2-0. We mentioned it on the kickoff show, the NFL kickoff show last time we aired here, and I mentioned that the Chiefs were poised to go undefeated. They wanted to. They mentioned that they wanted to. It's not a mystery if you follow NFL close enough. In the least bit, if you follow Mahomes on Twitter, they want to go undefeated this year. Baltimore, just like Tennessee, I'm sorry, but you'll be opening up 0-2 this season, I believe. I do think both teams still have a great chance to make the playoffs. Thank God they have an extra game to deal with to make sure it happens. But yeah, I think Kansas City wins this game. I'm again, it's very Brady esque, where I'm not voting or I'm not rooting or not betting against Pat Mahomes, especially not in prime time. I got KC. Who you got, Clark?
Yeah, it's KC as well. They are just their offense is just way too good. Even though it took them a little bit of time in that Browns game last week to really get going, but the second they did, my goodness, it was just
Yeah,
a floodgate of scoring. And unfortunately for the Ravens, they just continue to try and find replacement pieces after losing Dobbins and Edwards and the other running back as well. I can't think of his name right away.
they lost one, two,
Justice
three on the
Hill.
depth chart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Justice Hill went away as well. So they're just continuing to find spots. Obviously, they still have Lamar Jackson. As long as they got him, they're going to be fine. But they're just not quite where the Chiefs are. And like you mentioned, after losing the Super Bowl last year, they are on a mission this year, and that mission is to not lose. So at this point, I'll stick with the Chiefs as well. So that is our pick sixes for week two. Again, we'll be posting these games up on all of our social media platforms. If you want to join in, just simply comment who you have. We'll add you to the list, and then we'll be doing some revealing rankings throughout the season. Just let everybody else know what's going on. As for right now, Fletch is 2 games down, but he's got a couple games to get caught back up. We've got a little difference in the
but
Saints Panthers, a little bit of difference in 49ers Eagles. So we'll see exactly what happens, and we'll start mixing in some other, a little bit harder games, maybe get some more differential in there as well. But for right now, Fletch is in the back seat at this point, but he'll be moving forward, maybe, potentially. But Fletch, for right now, let's go ahead and get into, for the final topic today, our NFL top 10 rankings post week one. And
yes.
something that you like to do, we like to do our rankings here. So starting off at number 10, who do you got?
Yes, sir. I have the San Francisco 49ers at number 10. Very good game last week. I would have liked to see them win by a little bit more. I think Clark, were they up 41-17 at one point?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, great job. But I understand. Losing Verrett was big. I do think they still are a formidable team, and just due to that big win, I'm not going to take much stake into that comeback. I don't think it was really. I think it was still out of reach. I like the Niners at the 10th spot.
Nothing wrong with that. At my number 10, I have the division foe, the Seattle Seahawks, at number 10. Again, Russell Wilson looking phenomenal. You could argue that they're a little bit higher. I would like to see what they would do against a little bit better of opponent. Not that Indianapolis is terrible, but they're just not quite the opponent that I would like to see them ranked. Again, these are very early rankings, so a lot's going to change over the next 2 or 3 weeks pretty quickly. But I like having Seattle at number 10 for right now. At my number 9, I have another NFC West team, the Arizona Cardinals, at number
Mm,
9. I really like what Kyler Murray's doing. I like the fact that they've been able to run the offense through him. We would like to see what they can do a little bit further into the season. Last year, they were basically a 500 team all year long. They would win a couple, lose a couple. So nothing's really, the jury's still out on the Cardinals right now, but I really like where they're going with this team. At number 9, who is your team?
yes, sir. Well, I mean, even though they lost, I'm still going to roll with them at number 9, just because I believe in them as a team, and I do think that's a very good ball club. And Baltimore, we're going with the Ravens at number 9. Look for them to really, like I said in my pickums, I do have them going on too. I do think the opening they should have beat the Raiders, and I mean, let's be honest, how many people really have them beating the Chiefs? So they may start off slow, but I think they'll be back. As of right now, I do have them still at the ninth spot.
Very nice pick, and like you mentioned, they're going to bounce back. They're going to get better. But I like them at your number 9. At number 8, who do you have just one spot ahead?
Yeah, one spot ahead of them. Also, another week one loser. I am a lot of my rankings. I will say, before I kind of dive too much into this, is the one thing that we have to keep in mind is this: where teams were last year, what would they look like this year compared to last year. But then also let's take into effect that this is the most different offseason that we've seen. coming off COVID issues last year, going into this year with a shortened preseason, then essentially a bye week before the season started instead of having that last warm up game. Even though starters don't play, they were still practicing very routinely. Whereas you got to think, it is football. I'm assuming there were less practices than there usually were during this 2 week span. So, and then you come into week one and you're trying to shake off some cobwebs. So, a lot of these teams that I have are kind of based on their success last year, which is one going to be Baltimore at the ninth spot, and then my eighth team, which is the Buffalo Bills. I do think they, have a lot to rebound from after week one, but you got to think the key guys that are on the field are still there. The defense is young and still improving with Ed Oliver, Trey White. I'm losing his name right now, but the linebacker that I would love to mention, if you could help me out, Clark, I'm not sure if you know who I'm talking about.
For the Bills,
Yes. Nonetheless, we'll get to that on the next podcast. I'll shout him out for sure. But again, young defense, talented, coming upcoming. We'll cut it here, and I'll go with the Bills at 8. Who you got at 8, man?
are you talking about Edmonds?
Yes, thank you so much. That is correct.
Yeah, it took me a hot minute to get there. I know I really liked that defense with Ed
Yeah.
Oliver there, Star Tualoe, Jerry
Hmm.
Hughes.
Yep.
Definitely got some nice pieces there, so I like them at number 8 for you. For my number 8, I have the Saints. They again was a question mark heading into this season. We weren't sure who their quarterback was going to be, either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. They came out and just looked super efficient. I think we'll put it that way. It's really hard to give them an overarching amazing grade just because of how terrible their opponent looked in week 1, but I like the fact that they were very efficient and he didn't make any mistakes. And that's basically what you want out of Jameis Winston. Show off the talent without giving the ball away and putting yourself in a 14-point hole. So I like them at number 8 for right now. That obviously may change and probably will change over the course of the season. At number 7, this is where my 49ers fall into play for me. I've got them 3 spots ahead of where you have them. I like where their offense is. The problem is health. Brandon Ayuk is having a little bit of a healthy scratch at this point. He's struggling to find himself on the depth chart. Defensively is the biggest question. Could easily put them further up into the top 10 or further outside of the top 10 if they can't stay healthy. But I like where they are right now. We'll see what happens moving forward. For your number 7, which team do you have slotted?
Yes, sir. Nice pick with that. I had him a little lower. If I'm not mistaken, where'd you have the Seahawks?
I had a number 10.
We got the Seahawks and the Niners flip, my friend. I got the Seahawks at 7. I really like what I saw against the Colts. Not saying the Colts are a great team, but remember that defense is supposed to be stout. They were a playoff team last year, if I'm not mistaken. So I like what the Seahawks were able to do. The offense is really good. The defense, yeah, they might still have a couple holes in it, but overall, we know that team is ran led by Russell Wilson. You got Chris Carson, you got DK Metcalf, you got Tyler Lockett. Pete Carroll's a great coach. I got them at 7, man. I think I pretty much kind of have them where I would have them left off last year. With maybe a slight, nudge over the Bills and Ravens due to their Week 1 losses.
Yeah, and again, we will see more of them. We'll see exactly what they can do. Maybe if the Titans can play a little bit of defense this week, we might see a little bit more of that offense, or just see more of the aerial assault that they showed against
Yep.
Indianapolis. I took a peek at your rankings. I know who your number 6 is, but tell the people who your number 6 is.
Yes, sir. My number 6 is the New Orleans Saints. Even though I don't really care too much about what happened week 1, that you got to realize the team is still the same as last year minus Drew Brees. And let's just keep it real about Drew Brees. Last year, that wasn't really the Hall of Fame level Drew Brees. Um, Jameis Winston has much better arm talent this year than Drew Brees had last year. We and as crazy as that may sound, Father Time is undefeated. Let's just be real. It's a reason why Drew Brees retired. It's a reason why he was hurt a little bit last year. So I'm rolling with the Saints at 6. Again, off the strength of what they were able to do last year, what they were able to bring back this year, and then also to just how well they played on Sunday. I do believe that a better Packers team would have, maybe beat them or at least been in the game. I don't know if they would have beat them just because of how well the Saints were playing. And this is a team that seemed very well prepared coming out of this unusual off season. I don't know if they hold this high throughout the season, but I'm not going to negate what they did last year and also how they played on Sunday. So we're going to roll with the Saints at 6.
Yeah, not too bad of a pick. Again, I had them just a few spots back, but nothing too terrible there. For my number six, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers at number six. Their defense really should be in the top five. They are tremendously talented on defense. It's the offense is the question mark. Obviously, Najee Harris is still a rookie. We haven't really seen him fully unleashed as of yet, even though he did play, I think, 100% of their offensive snaps on Sunday. So he's heavily utilized in that offense. The problem's going to be with the quarterback play. Big Ben, basically on the way out at this point. Pro Football Focus rated him as the worst quarterback in the NFL last week, based on their rankings. So we'll see if that offense can get back to being a very high scoring offense. They've got the weaponry there. They've got the pieces needed, especially with the defensive side of the ball. If they can keep the defense from having to play 95% on the field, they should be fine, and you will see them start creeping up a little bit further and further. But maybe, like to your point, when we're ranking these, especially for Week One, basing it off last year, this was a team that went 11 and 0 and then crawled their way into the playoffs and winning the division, finishing 1 and 5 on the end of the year. So it's kind of a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth, but I like where they are now. Their defense can easily get them in the top five. It's their offense is what really has to push them over the edge. So for a quick recap of our 6 through 10, Fletch at 10, you had the 49ers, you had then the Ravens at 9, the Bills at 8, the Seahawks at 7, and the Saints at 6. For me, I had the Seahawks at 10, the Cardinals at 9, the Saints at 8, the 49ers at 7, and then the Steelers at 6. So let's go ahead and move on to the more important side of the top 10, the top 5. Fletch, who's number 5?
Yes, sir. You mentioned them just a minute ago at your number 6, and I do have them in my 5. I had the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, one thing, the reason why I have them where they are is partially due to them beating the Bills. They were a playoff team last year. You mentioned they kind of crawled into the playoffs, and last year you can talk a lot of trash about how bad the schedule was. They didn't really have many, quality opponents, and when they started to play those, is when that skid started last season. They started this season off by beating the Buffalo Bills, who last year was a contending AFC playoff team. That was a big win for them. That's a lot of boost in their confidence for a lot of these young guys. I do think you'll see Najee Harris, exponentially improve game to game, as far as either not so much a skill set, but also production. And then, with Big Ben, I disagree strongly with Pro Football Focus rating him as the worst quarterback. I understand there's some metrics involved, but there's no way you can tell me that he played worse than Aaron Rodgers played or worse than Andy Dalton played Week One. I just want to throw that out there. Big Ben will do fine. He is old. He is aged, just like Drew Brees last year. Drew Brees did fine. I'm not saying Drew Brees played great. I'm not saying Big Ben is great any longer, but Big Ben will be fine. He has the weapons around him to do so. And this team, I think this is the last hurrah with Big Ben. I think they want to make some things happen. Pay TJ Watt before the game to make sure everything was good there. And that defense, like you said, is a force to be reckoned with. That possibly could be the best defense in the league right now.
Yeah, and I agree. And I actually have mine flipped. At number 5, I have the Buffalo Bills. And I know they just lost to the Steelers. I understand that. But I think over the entirety of the season, you're going to see the Bills be the better team overall. Maybe not defensively. We've talked in quite some length of how great that Steelers defense is. But I think that offense, once it really gets going, it's going to be hard to stop. They were so good last year. I fully expect them to get right back where they left off. It's not like they're going to try and run the ball. Devin Singletary, they're not going to lean on the run game. It's going to be having to pass the ball. Josh Allen has to protect the ball a lot better than he did in Week 1, but you're not going to see the Steelers pass rush like he did every single week. I truly believe that they are going to be a very, very good team this year. Just get away from Pittsburgh for a hot minute and you'll be fine. Moving to number 4, let me get my rankings back up here. At number 4, I have the Los Angeles Rams at number 4. They looked rather impressive in week one. I love the fact that Matthew Stafford comes right into that offense and just dominates, shows us exactly what happens when you have weapons to throw to. Something that he's never had in his entire Detroit career outside of Calvin Johnson. Absolutely love this offense defensively. They're just as good as they were before. I know they lost a few pieces in the offseason, but I like them at number four. Fletch, who do you have at your number four?
Yes, sir. I have the Cleveland Browns at number four. The Cleveland Browns from last year were very highly rated on my list, and coming into this year, they will remain highly rated until they prove me otherwise. They went toe to toe with the Kansas City Chiefs. And if anybody that watched that game, if you think that the Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browns of old, you're fooled. You are a fool. They are a force to be reckoned with. They are an AFC title contender. They have enough talent to win a Super Bowl. They didn't even have Odell Beckham Jr. last night or Sunday night. I'm sorry, or Sunday afternoon, and still went toe to toe and was up a good portion of the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm really looking for big things out the Browns this year. I do think they should win the division this year in the AFC North. You know, as stout as that is, and I got them fourth still, even with that loss on Sunday.
And I have a feeling we'll be talking about these two teams in a hot second. Number three, who do you got, Fletch?
I have your number four as my number three with the Los Angeles Rams. As we're gonna rewind a little bit, go back to the kickoff show that we did a week or so ago, and that is my NFC champion. That's who I believe will win. They played great, and I still believe they will win. I love what Stafford did. I love how he just came in flawlessly, and like you said, it's amazing what he can do with weapons, and we saw that on full display. We didn't even see Robert Woods get heavily involved. That's something that we'll probably see a little bit more. Cooper Cup looks poised to have another great season. Tyler Higbee was involved as well, which was very nice to see. Daryl Henderson had a good game. There's a lot to say about this offense and the defense. You know what's on that side of the ball. You got Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey back there. There's I don't think there's no slowing this team down. I think you'll see a lot of wins this year. I would be surprised if they're not in my top five at least almost every week, if not the whole time.
Yeah, again, it like I mentioned, I think we're just talking about the same teams yet again. At your number four is my number three. I've got the Cleveland Browns there. You had mentioned they went toe to toe with Kansas City in that first week. Their running offense is absolutely probably the best in the league. Defensively, they've got to really kind of just tighten it just a little bit. They'll be facing not Kansas City every single week, so this team will be able to run the ball and play great over and over again. I expect good things from this team, and it's really hard to say. It kind of like there's a mental block in my mind for all the years. But it has been, as I think it was 2001 was the first time or the last time they started the season off 1-0. So that streak continues forward. Maybe with the NFL scheduling, schedule somebody else. Give them a
Yeah.
chance to break that streak. Something. But for right now, I like them at number three. Again, we flip flopped our three and four. Uh, Not surprisingly there. I'm going to go ahead and say my two and number one
Go
because,
for it.
you know, at this point, I think we're just kind of flip flopping back and forth. We're really close. You're really close to all these picks, but you're not quite there yet. But for my number two, it's going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is who I have at number two. At my number one, I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. Uh, both went to the Super Bowl last year. Both played really, really well in Week One. You you could argue either spot. I'm not really going to push too hard either way. Obviously, the Buccaneers look great, but still gave up good points to a very good offense. Kansas City looked good, but also gave up points to another very strong offense. Then finally, kind of kicked it in gear a little bit late. Uh, Fletch, I have a feeling these are your top two teams, but what order do you have them in?
Yes, sir. Of course, these are my top two teams. We got them flipped again. Doing quite a bit of that through our top six. It looks like. However, I do have the Bucks number one, the Chiefs number two. Biggest reason being, I mean, Bucks won the Super Bowl, Chiefs lost the Super Bowl. I understand Chiefs have a revamped offensive line. They look pretty good against the against the Browns, and then the Bucks. They look pretty solid, and honestly, they kind of I wouldn't say they got away with one, but they showed that championship medal, man, and pulled out that Week 1 win on Thursday night against Dallas. I do think Dallas has an extremely explosive offense, and I love that Tampa Bay obviously has an explosive offense as well, and they were able to go toe to toe with that and eventually trump them in the end. I mean, Chiefs are right there as well, man. I mean, we're splitting hairs essentially between these two teams until we see otherwise, or possible injury, God forbid. So yeah, man, I got Bucks number one, Chiefs number two. Um, very good list. I do want to ask Clark. I have to kind of play. I don't even. I wouldn't even say devil's advocate. Where are the Ravens, man?
For me, the Ravens, the problem is going to be the fact that they've lost so much talent on the running game. They're going to have to use a committee of Tyson Williams. They're bringing in Latavius Murray. They had to sign Devontae Freeman and Lev Bell onto their practice squad. They just got Freeman off their practice squad as well. That's going to be the crux for me. If they have to rely on Lamar Jackson to run it 24/7, they're going to win some games, but the problem's going to be he's going to get tired and they're going to have to throw the ball, and they weren't tremendously efficient throwing the ball at least through one game sample size at this point.
Okay.
If I had to rank them, it would probably be at 11 or 12. They'd be just on the outside looking in. Again, we'll see what happens in week 2. If they look really good against the Chiefs and they push them similar to what to the Browns did in week 1, yeah, I've got no problems pushing out a team that maybe falters in week 2, something like that. Maybe the Saints maybe falter or the Cardinals falter, something along those lines. But as for now, I've got the Ravens just on that outside, just peeking through that window. But if they put up a good showing against the Chiefs, we might be talking about them next week in another top 10. Uh, any other teams that are just outside of your top 10 that could potentially work their way in?
Yeah, I mean, we got a couple bounce back teams. The obvious ones are going to be the Packers and the Titans. We're expecting them to bounce back this season. I think most are. The teams outside the top 10, though, outside of those two usual suspects that you'll be looking for that are kind of honorable mentions for me were the Cardinals. The Cardinals, if I had to pick an 11th, they were my 11th team after week 1. Shout out to the NFC West for winning every game this week.
And the
Um,
AFC West.
Yes, and the AFC West. And the other team that I was going to mention that is, I'm will be a little bit biased here. The Denver Broncos may be poised to make quite a bit of noise. I know it was just the Giants week 1. I know week 2 they have a easy opponent again. I guess you could say, coming up here, which yeah, the Jags. So the thing is that schedule is involved in this. We saw what happened with Pittsburgh last year. Easy schedule led to 11 straight wins. The Broncos do have an easy schedule this year. So just be on the lookout for them to rise in the power rankings because if you beat who you're supposed to beat, then yes, you will move up in the standings as well as power rankings. Plain and simple. And I think they have enough talent to do so. So those are a few teams that I think are on the rise that could, possibly be knocking on that door to get into the top 10. There are a few others, but Clark, who do you think as well? Kind of some honorable mentions here, week 1.
Really, Baltimore is at the top of that list for me. Another team, you could potentially throw the Raiders in there. They got a very nice overtime win against the Ravens in week 1. I would like to see a little bit more out of that running game. I know Josh Jacobs has got a little bit of a toe injury. We'll see what John Gruden can cook up out there in Las Vegas, but they looked decently well overall. Another team that could mark their way through might be Miami Dolphins. I know they play in a somewhat weak division besides Buffalo at this point. They've got a nice game coming up here. I believe they play the Jets this week. Or no, they play the Jets this week, correct?
That is right.
So
No, who did you say? I'm sorry. The Dolphins
the Dolphins,
play the Bills this
the
week. I
Bills. That's right.
apologize.
That was part of our Pick Six. I struggling here. Uh, but yeah, they've got a big game against Buffalo at home. They got a really good chance to add to that resume and maybe even replace Baltimore or replace Buffalo in the top 10 at this point, especially if Buffalo continues to struggle on the offensive side or defensive side of things. Uh, so those are a couple of teams that I can think of. Again, with one game sample size, it's kind of really hard to really tell if a team's going to be good or not heading into week 2. Obviously, we saw what happened with Tennessee the first week. See if they can rebound into the next week. Fletch, anything else before we shut it down here today?
Yeah, man, I'm gonna leave the people with this, man. This is something that we talked about a little off air, a little bit college football, NFL football associated is the upcoming 2022 NFL draft, and thus um, player has been mentioned. And I don't know if everybody's been following this or not, but I'm on Twitter. I try to pay attention a little bit to the sports world. I mean, essentially, that's all we follow on Twitter, Clark. You know how this rolls. And just based on what we've been hearing, man, this quarterback out of Liberty University. Liberty University, for people at home that don't know, is in Lynchburg, Virginia. This campus is in the mountains of Virginia, essentially. I've been there before, Clark, and I'll be honest with you, it's one of the most scariest drives I've ever been on. I just keep it real with you. Um, However, back to the football team, the quarterback Malik Willis has been compared to Lamar Jackson, has been compared to incoming rookie Zach Wilson. Jalen Hurts is another comparison that has been drawn. And, there's some big games on Liberty's schedule this year that's going to show the people if this kid has it or not. He right now is listed as the number two quarterback coming into this year's draft out of Liberty University. You see it happen every once in a while. You saw Trey Lance last year. You saw Joe Flacco back in the day. You saw Carson Wentz back in the day as well. Getting drafted from smaller schools. So it's not a mystery that this can happen. But this is something that I don't think many people are seeing week two. So just keep an eye out on this kid, man. Also, too, when we talk about comparisons, I mentioned, the names that I mentioned, not only from last year, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance is another comparison that SportingNews.com has likened him to. And the kid is climbing the board fast. He's not the tallest, but he has great size for his height at 6'1". I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, two. Let me just double check here on the size here. Yeah, 220 basically. 218 is what they have him listed as. And let me give you the 2020 stats really quick, Clark. 64% passing, not crazy, but at a running quarterback, that's actually pretty solid. 2,200 yards, 20 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, but 944 rushing yards and 14 more rushing TDs. So the kid accounted for still well over 3,000 yards and 34 touchdowns while turning the ball over via interception 6 times. So there's a lot to like. And he's electric. I think that's the biggest thing. He is fun to watch, man. I've seen highlights. I'm yet to see a full game from beginning to end, but I mean, I've watched the highlights from the first two games this season. It's fun to watch. And the games coming up this season, I believe they play Louisiana, who was formerly ranked before they lost to Texas week one of the college football season. They also, if I'm not mistaken, they have a top 25 opponent on the schedule coming up. Allow me 1 second to go ahead and find that for the folks at home. Um, I'm excited about the kid. Is kind of what I'm getting at. Um, yes, Ole Miss, and that matchup is going to be something to see. That's November 2nd. You're pitting him against what's the kid's name? Corral. Am I saying that
Matt
right?
Curl.
Yes, Matt Corral. That's how you say it. Matt Corral, another electric QB that's fun to watch. That's climbing up the draft boards right now. That's going to be a good matchup. So you got a couple good matchups. Those are actually back-to-back weeks. They play, or for them, back-to-back games. There's a bye week between it. November 6th against Liberty. November 20th against Louisiana. We'll touch on those games when we get to them on Thus Podcast. Coming up this weekend, if you just want to check it out, 6 p.m. this Saturday against Old Dominion. Um, just check the kid out. I don't know how good Old Dominion is in football school. Hell, I don't even know how good Liberty is, but I know Malik Willis is electric. So that's somebody to watch and I'll be paying attention to all season long. And I think the folks at home should be too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely keep an eye on that November 2nd matchup at Ole Miss. That's going to be really the key coming out party potentially for this quarterback. Very young, very talented. He's got great size, but again, going against maybe not the greatest of competition within his conference, not really his fault, but he will have some opportunities moving forward. As for us, again, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. If you are listening to us on all the various different podcasting sites of Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the various other ones. Thank you once again. If you're not sure which one to listen to, simply go to anchor.fm/aka sports. They're all listed there. Pick your favorite. Listen to us, comment, subscribe, link, or hit the bell. Do whatever it is that you want to do. And also remember, Pick Six Challenge. Simply just put in your picks in the comments. Let us know who you want to pick. We'll add you to the list, and then we will show off just how smart you are. As for now, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and we're out.
Peace.